I never thought I'd own my childhood home, especially not like this. But life has a way of coming full circle when you least expect it. Growing up, my father was a successful real estate developer, something he never let anyone forget. The kind of man who wore success like armor and used his achievements as a weapon against those who didn't measure up to his standards. Unfortunately, I was usually at the top of that list. Our family dinners were a weekly ritual that I had come to dread. Every Sunday at 6 p.m. sharp, my father expected everyone to be seated at the grand mahogany table that dominated our dining room, a table that had witnessed countless tears and harsh words over the years. That particular Sunday seemed no different at first. I arrived 15 minutes early, as always, afraid of triggering his temper by being late. My mother greeted me with her customary tight smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. She'd mastered the art of emotional invisibility years ago, present physically but absent in every way that mattered. "Your sister and her husband are already here," she whispered, as if speaking too loudly might summon my father's disapproval. "And your brother just called. He's running late." Of course he was. My brother James could do no wrong in our father's eyes. Even his tardiness would be excused with a laugh and a jovial pat on the back. The golden child, the heir apparent to the family business, the son who had followed in our father's footsteps. I nodded and made my way to the living room where my sister Emily sat with her husband Mark. They were the picture of success, both lawyers at prestigious firms, living in an expensive brownstone downtown. Another example of children who hadn't disappointed our father. "Hey, Alice," Emily said, her smile genuine but cautious. She knew what these dinners were like for me. "How's the new job going?" Before I could answer, my father's voice boomed from the doorway. "Probably the same as all her other jobs. Short-lived." There it was. Not even 5 minutes and he was already taking his shots. I forced a smile and took a deep breath. "Actually, it's going really well. The tech startup I joined is growing fast, and I've been put in charge of their marketing department." My father scoffed as he moved to the bar cart to pour himself his customary pre-dinner scotch. "Another one of those bubble companies that'll be gone in a year. Should have gone to business school like I told you." I bit my tongue. At 34, I had long ago given up trying to impress him with my accomplishments. My degree from NYU, my successful marketing career, my recently purchased condo, none of it mattered because I hadn't followed his prescribed path. Dinner began once James arrived, 20 minutes late and full of charming excuses about an important client call. My father laughed and clapped him on the shoulder. "That's my boy. Always hustling." The meal progressed with the usual conversation topics: my father's recent business deals, James's successful sales, Emily's latest court victory. I sat quietly, pushing food around my plate and sipping my wine, hoping to remain invisible. "So, Alice," my father suddenly said, turning his attention to me, "your mother tells me you're thinking about investing in some property." I straightened in my seat, surprised he'd bothered to remember something about my life. "Yes, I've been looking at a small commercial space downtown. The area is up and coming, and I think it would be a good investment." For a brief moment, I saw something like interest flicker across his face, and my heart leapt with a pathetic hope that had never quite died, the hope that one day, just once, he might approve of something I did. "And how exactly do you plan to finance this?" he asked, cutting into his steak with precision. "I've saved up a good down payment," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "And with my credit score and income, I've been pre-approved for a solid loan." My father laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "You? Getting into real estate? That's like a kindergartner trying to teach calculus." James chuckled, always ready to join in when my father started in on me. My mother stared down at her plate, and Emily shot me a sympathetic glance. I felt my cheeks burn, but kept my expression neutral. "I've done my research, Dad. The numbers make sense, and—" "The numbers make sense," he mimicked, his voice taking on that cruel edge I knew too well. "You don't know the first thing about property values or market trends. You'll lose your shirt." "Dad, I've actually—" "Don't dad me," he snapped, suddenly angry. "I've spent 40 years building my business, learning every aspect of real estate the hard way, And you think you can just waltz in and succeed because you read some articles online? The table fell silent. My mother's knuckles whitened around her fork. Emily and Mark exchanged uncomfortable glances. James smirked into his wine glass. I should have let it go. Should have nodded and changed the subject like I always did. But something in me had finally had enough. I'm not trying to compete with you, I said quietly. I'm just trying to make a smart investment for my future. My father's face darkened. Your future? What future? You bounce from job to job, have no direction, and now you think you're ready to play in the big leagues? You're delusional. His words hit like physical blows, but I refused to look away from him. I've held the same job for 3 years now. I've been promoted twice. My portfolio... Your portfolio, he spat, slamming his hand down on the table hard enough to make the silverware jump. Your little marketing stunts for companies that sell useless products to idiots. That's not achievement. That's not success. Silence fell over the table again. Heavier this time. Suffocating. Richard, my mother said softly, her voice barely audible. Please, not at dinner. He ignored her completely, his eyes fixed on me with that familiar contempt. You want to know why you'll fail at real estate, Alice? Because you fail at everything. You don't have what it takes. No backbone, no vision, no drive. Each word was carefully chosen to cut deepest. He'd had years to learn all my insecurities, all my soft spots. That's not fair, Emily said, surprising everyone. My sister rarely contradicted our father. Stay out of this, Emily, he snapped without looking at her. His focus remained entirely on me, his expression twisted with disdain. You know what your problem is, Alice? You think you deserve things you haven't earned. You think you can play in my world without paying your dues. I set down my fork carefully. I don't want to play in your world, Dad. I just want to make my own investments, build my own life. His laugh was cold and mocking. Your own life? What life? You've accomplished nothing. You own nothing of value. You are nothing of value. The dining room seemed to shrink around us. No one moved. No one spoke. You're not even worth the floor you walk on, he yelled, his voice echoing off the walls of the ornate dining room. I built this house. I paid for the education you wasted. I gave you every opportunity, and what do I have to show for it? A disappointment. Something broke inside me then. Not my spirit, but the chains I'd allowed him to place around it. Years of seeking his approval, of internalizing his criticism, of believing I wasn't enough. It all crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. I stood up slowly, placed my napkin beside my half-eaten meal, and looked him directly in the eyes. Thank you for dinner, Mother, I said, my voice calm despite the trembling I felt inside. I need to go now. That's right, my father sneered. Run away. That's what you do best. I didn't respond, didn't look back as I collected my purse and coat, didn't acknowledge James's smug expression or Emily's concerned one. I simply walked out, closing the front door quietly behind me. In my car, I finally allowed the tears to come. Not tears of hurt or shame as had been the case so many times before, but tears of release, of resolution, of something that felt strangely like freedom. I pulled out my phone and made a call I'd been considering for weeks, but hadn't found the courage to make until that moment. Jessica? It's Alice. Remember that investment opportunity you mentioned? I'm in. Let's talk tomorrow. As I drove away from my childhood home, I had no idea that this call would set in motion events that would change everything. I just knew I was done trying to earn love from someone incapable of giving it. Done measuring my worth by my father's twisted standards. What I didn't know then was that my father's business wasn't as solid as everyone believed. That the empire he'd built with such ruthless determination was standing on a foundation of sand. That the moment he'd chosen to humiliate me one last time would be the very moment that gave me the strength to walk away, and eventually, to walk back in on my own terms. But I would learn all of this soon enough. The week that followed that disastrous dinner was a blur of activity. I took 2 personal days from work, something I never did, to meet with Jessica, my college roommate turned successful investment banker. We'd stayed close over the years, and she'd been trying to get me involved in a property investment group for months. "This is perfect timing, Alice," she said as we sat in her corner office with its sweeping views of the city skyline. "The group just got wind of a distressed property package that's about to hit the market. Multiple properties being liquidated quickly due to some financial troubles of the owner." I nodded, trying to focus despite the emotional exhaustion that had followed Sunday's confrontation. "What kind of properties?" "Mostly residential, some commercial. All undervalued because they need to move fast." She slid a folder across her glass desk. "Take a look." I opened it and began flipping through the property listings, and froze when I reached the third page. There it was, my childhood home. The elegant colonial with its manicured lawn and circular driveway. The property where I'd experienced so much pain. My hands trembled slightly as I stared at the listing. "This one," I said, pointing to the page. "This is my father's house." Jessica's eyes widened. "Richard Thompson is your father? The Richard Thompson?" "Yes." I couldn't take my eyes off the listing. "But this doesn't make sense. Why would his house be part of a distressed property package?" Jessica frowned, taking the folder back and examining the page more closely. "According to this, it's part of a portfolio being liquidated to cover debts and avoid bankruptcy proceedings. The owner's overleveraged and needs cash fast." My mind raced. My father, in financial trouble? The man who'd built his identity around his business success? Who'd used that success to belittle and demean me my entire life? It seemed impossible. "Are you sure this information is correct?" I asked. "Our firm is handling part of the debt restructuring, so yes, it's accurate." She studied my face with concern. "Alice, what are you thinking?" What was I thinking? 1,000 thoughts collided in my mind. Confusion, disbelief, and something else, something that felt dangerously close to opportunity. "How much?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. "For your father's house? It's listed at $8 million, but in this package deal, they're accepting 1.4. It's significantly under market value because of the time pressure. I had just over $800,000 in savings and investments, the result of years of living frugally and investing wisely. Not enough on its own, but with a loan." "I want it," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Jessica's eyebrows shot up. "Your father's house? Alice, are you sure that's a good idea, given your complicated relationship with him?" I thought about Sunday night, about decades of belittlement and emotional abuse, about being told I was worth nothing, not even the floor I walked on. "I've never been more sure of anything," I replied. "Can you help me make this happen?" The next several days were a whirlwind of paperwork, bank meetings, and financial maneuvering. I liquidated some investments, secured a loan for the remainder, and with Jessica's expertise guiding me through the process, made an offer on my father's house. Just my father's house, not any of the other properties in the package. The offer was accepted with startling speed. Either the financial situation was dire, or someone recognized my name and thought there was poetic justice in selling Richard Thompson's prized home to the daughter he'd demeaned for years. 3 days after making the offer, I received the call from Jessica. "It's done," she said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "The papers are signed. The house is yours, Alice." I sat down hard on my sofa, my legs suddenly unable to support me. "Mine?" "All yours. They've expedited everything because of the financial pressure. You can take possession on Friday." Friday, just 6 days after that fateful dinner. 6 days from "you're not even worth the floor you walk on" to owning the very floors he'd referenced. "There's something else," Jessica continued, her voice taking on an odd tone. "The sellers are requesting that you inform the current occupant of the change in ownership personally. Apparently, he doesn't yet know the house has been sold." My father didn't know. The realization hit me like a physical blow. He had no idea his house had been sold, let alone that I was the new owner. "Alice, are you still there?" "Yes," I replied, my mind racing. "Yes, I'm here, and yes, I'll inform him personally." The next 2 days passed in a strange haze of anticipation and anxiety. I continued going to work, attending meetings, answering emails, all while carrying this enormous secret. My father's house was mine, the home he'd built with money he'd flaunted, the symbol of his success and my supposed failure. It now belonged to me. On Thursday evening, I called a contractor recommended by Jessica, a high-end specialist who worked on luxury homes. "I need new flooring installed," I told him, "throughout the entire house. Can you start Monday?" "What kind of flooring?" he asked. I thought for a moment. "The best. Whatever is most expensive and highest quality. Price is no object." "We'd need to see the space first, take measurements." "You can do that Monday. I'll have the keys by then. I need this done quickly, and I'm willing to pay a premium for expedited work." There was a pause. "We could potentially start the demolition of the existing flooring on Monday if you're sure about this." "I'm sure," I said firmly. "Every floor in the house, every single one." Friday morning arrived with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I dressed carefully in a tailored charcoal suit, applied my makeup with precision, and drove to Jessica's office to pick up the keys and final paperwork. By noon, everything was official. I was the legal owner of my childhood home. I should have felt nervous as I drove the familiar route to the house that was now mine. Instead, I felt strangely calm. The anxiety that had plagued me whenever I approached this property in the past was gone, replaced by a steady certainty. I parked in the driveway rather than on the street, in the spot my father had always claimed as his own. The house looked exactly as it always had, imposing, perfectly maintained, a monument to wealth and status. Except now it was mine. I rang the doorbell and waited, the deed and keys tucked into my leather portfolio. The sound of footsteps approached, and then the door swung open to reveal my father. He looked smaller somehow, tired in a way I'd never seen before. The confident bluster that had always surrounded him was dimmed, his shoulders slightly stooped. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. "Alice?" His surprise quickly morphed into irritation. "What are you doing here? Your mother isn't home." "I'm not here to see Mother," I replied calmly. "I'm here to see you." His eyes narrowed with suspicion. "If this is about Sunday, I'm not apologizing. Everything I said was the truth." Of course he wouldn't apologize. He never did. "May I come in?" I asked, my voice cool and professional. He hesitated, then stepped aside with obvious reluctance. I walked past him into the foyer, my heels clicking on the marble floor, the very floor I would be replacing in 3 days' time. "I don't have time for whatever this is," he said, closing the door behind me. "I have a meeting in an hour." "This won't take long," I assured him, moving toward the living room without waiting for an invitation. It was my house now, after all. I had every right to go wherever I pleased. He followed me, his irritation growing visibly. "Alice, what is this about?" I set my portfolio on the coffee table and turned to face him. "I understand you've been having some financial difficulties." His face went rigid, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "Who told you that?" "It doesn't matter who told me. What matters is that I'm now your landlord." There was a moment of complete silence as my words hung in the air between us. Then he laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound. "What the hell are you talking about?" I opened my portfolio and removed the deed, holding it out to him. "I bought this house. It's mine now." He stared at the document but didn't take it. His face had gone pale beneath his perpetual tan. "That's not possible." "It's not only possible, it's done. The paperwork was finalized this morning." I placed the deed on the coffee table between us. "You can read it if you like." His hands were trembling slightly as he snatched up the document, his eyes scanning the page with growing disbelief. "This is some kind of joke, or a forgery." "It's neither," I replied calmly. "Your business is in trouble, Dad. This house was part of a distressed property package that was sold to cover your debts." The color drained completely from his face. How did I know? Or how did I afford it?" I smiled slightly. "It turns out I know more about real estate investment than you gave me credit for. And I've been quite successful in my career, the one you've spent years dismissing." He looked up from the deed, his eyes burning with a mix of humiliation and rage. "You did this to spite me." "No, Dad. I did this because it was a sound investment. The property was undervalued because of the quick sale requirement. I paused, letting my next words land with precision. And because I'm worth more than the floor I walk on. He flinched as his own words came back to him. You can't just... I can, and I have, I interrupted smoothly. Now, as your new landlord, I should inform you that renovations will be starting Monday morning. I'll be replacing all the flooring throughout the house. His face contorted with fury. This is my home. You can't just waltz in here and start tearing it apart. Actually, I can. It's my home now. I closed my portfolio and picked it up. You're welcome to continue living here during the renovations, of course, or you can find other accommodations. Either way, the crews will be arriving at 8 a.m. on Monday. My father looked utterly lost, as though the ground beneath him had shifted and he could no longer find his footing. For the first time in my life, I saw him speechless. This isn't over, he finally managed to say, his voice hoarse. You're right, I agreed. It's just beginning. I turned and walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at him. Oh, and Dad? The floors I'm installing are imported Italian marble. I think you'll find they're worth walking on, even for someone like me. I left him standing in the middle of the living room, still clutching the deed to the house that was no longer his. As I walked to my car, I felt neither triumph nor vindication, only a strange sense of peace. The burden I'd carried for so long, the need for his approval, the pain of his rejection, it all seemed to fall away with each step I took across the driveway. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. Did you really buy Dad's house? News traveled fast in our family. I smiled slightly as I typed my response. Yes, and I'm starting with the floors. Monday morning arrived with a clarity that felt almost surreal. I woke before my alarm, dressed in practical clothes, jeans and a light sweater, and drove to the house that was now mine. My house. The contractors' trucks were already lined up along the street when I arrived, a team of workers standing in the driveway waiting for instructions. I could see curtains twitching in neighboring windows. No doubt the sudden appearance of construction vehicles at Richard Thompson's prestigious address was causing quite the stir. Ms. Thompson? A tall man with a weathered face and clipboard approached me. I'm Mike Daniels, the project manager. We spoke on the phone. Yes, thank you for coming on such short notice, I said, shaking his hand. No problem. Like I said, we can start demo today, but I'd like to walk through with you first to confirm exactly what you want done. I nodded and led him toward the front door, fishing the keys from my purse, keys that still felt foreign in my hand. As I unlocked the door, I half expected to find my father waiting on the other side, ready to launch into another tirade about my inadequacies. But the foyer was empty, the house silent. Will the current occupants be staying during construction? Mike asked as we stepped inside. I'm not sure, I admitted. That's up to them. We moved through the house room by room, with me confirming that yes, I wanted all flooring replaced. The marble in the foyer, the hardwood in the living and dining rooms, the travertine in the kitchen, the carpeting upstairs. Everything. This is going to be loud and messy, Mike warned. Probably take about 2 weeks, even with an expedited schedule and extra crew. That's fine, I replied. Just make sure everything is top quality. As we finished our walkthrough and returned to the foyer, the front door opened. My mother stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes wide with shock as she took in the scene. Me standing in the middle of her home with a contractor, both of us surrounded by workers who had begun bringing in equipment. Alice! Her voice was barely audible. What's happening? Before I could answer, Mike excused himself tactfully and stepped outside to give us privacy. I faced my mother, suddenly aware of how small she looked, how fragile. Mom, I said gently, I bought the house. I'm doing some renovations. She set her shopping bags down slowly, her hands trembling slightly. You bought our house? How is that possible? Dad's company is in financial trouble. This house was part of a property package being sold to cover debts. I moved toward her, concerned by her pallor. Mom, are you okay? She sank onto the bench in the foyer, her eyes unfocused. He didn't tell me, she whispered. About the business, about the house. He didn't say anything. The realization hit me then. She hadn't known. All these years, she'd lived in my father's shadow, accepting his controlling behavior, his angry outbursts, his emotional manipulation. And he hadn't even respected her enough to tell her they were losing their home. I sat beside her, taking her cold hands in mine. "I'm sorry, Mom. I thought you knew." She shook her head slowly. "Your father. He doesn't tell me about the business, says I wouldn't understand." A bitter smile touched her lips briefly. 38 years of marriage, and he couldn't even tell me we were in trouble. We sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the workers bringing in equipment creating a strange backdrop to this intimate moment. "Where is Dad now?" I asked finally. "At the office. He left early this morning. Said he had meetings all day." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly for perhaps the first time in years. "Did you really buy this house, Alice? Our home?" "Yes," I admitted. "After what he said to me at dinner last Sunday. I don't know. Something broke inside me. And when the opportunity came up..." To my surprise, she nodded. "I heard what he said to you. We all did." Her voice strengthened. "It was cruel. Unnecessarily cruel." I blinked back unexpected tears. My mother had never openly acknowledged my father's treatment of me before. "You don't have to leave," I said impulsively. "You can stay here as long as you want." She looked around the foyer, at the workers now beginning to lay down protective coverings over the furniture. "I don't know if I should," she said quietly. "Maybe it's time I made some changes too." The front door opened again, and my father stormed in, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. He stopped short when he saw us sitting together. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, glaring at the workers and then at me. "I got calls from 3 different neighbors about construction trucks at my house." "Richard," my mother said, her voice startlingly firm. "Alice owns the house now. She has every right to renovate it." His gaze swung to her, confusion momentarily replacing anger. "You knew about this?" "No," she replied calmly. "You didn't tell me our home was being sold, just like you didn't tell me your business was failing." The color drained from his face. "Margaret, I can explain." "I'm sure you can," she interrupted, standing up. "You've always been very good at explaining things after the fact. But right now, I think we should let Alice and her workers get started." My father looked utterly lost, caught between his anger at me and his shock at my mother's unexpected response. "Where are we supposed to go while they tear apart our home?" he demanded. "My home," I corrected gently. "And you have options. You could stay at a hotel, or with James. I'm sure your favorite child would be happy to accommodate you." His face darkened. "This is some kind of sick revenge, isn't it, for what I said at dinner?" I stood up, meeting his gaze steadily. "No, Dad. This is business. The house was a good investment at the price offered. The renovations will increase its value." I paused. The fact that it also happens to be poetic justice is just a bonus. "You ungrateful little..." "Richard!" My mother's sharp tone cut him off. "That's enough. We're leaving." To my astonishment, my father fell silent, though I could see a vein pulsing in his temple. My mother turned to me, her expression a complex mix of emotions I couldn't quite decipher. "How long will the renovations take?" she asked, her voice remarkably steady. "About 2 weeks for the flooring," I replied. "If you need a place to stay." "We'll be fine," she assured me, then hesitated. "But perhaps we could have lunch tomorrow? Just the 2 of us?" I nodded, emotion catching in my throat. "I'd like that." My father watched this exchange with narrowed eyes, but remained uncharacteristically quiet. Finally, he turned on his heel and stalked back toward the door. "Come on, Margaret. We're going to James's." My mother squeezed my hand briefly before following him. At the door, she paused and looked back at me. "Alice, I'm proud of you." 3 simple words I'd waited a lifetime to hear. After they left, I stood in the center of the foyer, surrounded by the growing chaos of construction preparation, feeling strangely calm. This house, which had been the site of so much pain for me, was being transformed. just as I was. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. True to his word, Mike and his crew worked efficiently, tearing out the old flooring and installing the new. I visited the site daily, making decisions about finishes and materials, watching my childhood home transform before my eyes. My lunch with my mother turned into a series of meetings, sometimes at restaurants, sometimes at my condo. For the first time in my life, we began to talk openly about her marriage, about my childhood, about the emotional toll my father's behavior had taken on both of us. "I should have protected you more," she admitted during one of these conversations, her eyes brimming with long suppressed tears. "I was so afraid of his anger, of rocking the boat. I told myself it was better to keep the peace. But I was wrong." "You were trapped too, Mom," I said gently. "In your own way." She shook her head. "Not like you think. I had options. I had family money, enough to leave if I'd wanted to, but I stayed. Out of habit, out of fear, out of... I don't even know what anymore." This revelation stunned me, the idea that my mother had always had the financial means to leave but had chosen to stay. It reframed my entire understanding of my parents' relationship. "Where is Dad staying?" I asked, changing the subject. "With James and Rebecca." She sighed. "It's not going well. Your brother's patience is wearing thin, and Rebecca has already threatened to move to a hotel if your father doesn't adjust his attitude," as she put it. I couldn't help but smile a little at that. My brother was finally getting a taste of what it was like to be on the receiving end of our father's critical nature. "And you? Where are you staying?" "I've taken a suite at the Langham," she replied, surprising me again. I needed some space to think. As the renovations progressed, an unexpected development occurred. Emily called me one evening, her voice tight with barely contained excitement. "Alice, have you heard what's happening with Dad's company?" "No, what?" "The board called an emergency meeting yesterday. They've suspended him pending an investigation into financial mismanagement. Apparently, he's been making high-risk investments without proper approval and misrepresenting the company's financial position to shareholders." I sat down hard on my sofa. "Are you serious?" "Deadly. James just called me in a panic. He works there too, remember? He's worried about what this means for his position." She paused. "Alice, did you know about this when you bought the house?" "I knew Dad was in financial trouble," I admitted. "But not the details. Not about the board investigation." "Well, it's chaos over there, and Dad's..." She hesitated. "He's not handling it well." An understatement, I was sure. By the time the flooring renovations were complete, the landscape had shifted dramatically. My father had been officially removed from his position as CEO of the company he'd founded. The financial troubles that had been hidden were now fully exposed, and the company's stock had plummeted. James, though not implicated in the financial improprieties, was struggling to distance himself from the scandal. The day I officially moved into my newly renovated house, I received another surprising call, this one from my mother's lawyer. "Ms. Thompson, I'm calling to inform you that your mother has filed for divorce from your father and is seeking a consultation regarding her financial options. She gave me your number as a contact." I stood in the middle of my new living room, surrounded by the few pieces of furniture I'd brought from my condo, stunned into silence. My mother, divorcing my father after nearly 4 decades of marriage. It seemed impossible. Yet when I called her to confirm, her voice was clearer and more decisive than I'd ever heard it. "It's time, Alice," she said simply. "Long past time." As I hung up the phone, I walked slowly through my new home, my footsteps echoing on the gleaming Italian marble floors that were indeed worth walking on, worth standing tall on, worth building a new life upon. 1 month after taking possession of the house, I hosted a dinner party. It wasn't planned as an act of symbolism, not consciously at least, but as I prepared for my guests to arrive, I couldn't help but appreciate the parallel. The same dining room where my father had humiliated me would now be a place of warmth and genuine connection. I'd invited Jessica, who had helped me acquire the house, Emily and her husband Mark, a few close friends from work, and of course my mother. James had declined my invitation with a terse text message, still struggling with his new reality at the company and his strained relationship with our father, who was now staying in a small apartment downtown. The new floors gleamed under the soft lighting I'd installed, the Italian marble in the foyer flowing into hand-scraped hardwood in the dining room. I'd replaced the heavy, formal dining table with something lighter, more welcoming. A round table that encouraged conversation rather than the hierarchical seating arrangement my father had always insisted upon. The doorbell rang at precisely 7 p.m. My mother stood on the doorstep, elegant in a simple blue dress I'd never seen before, holding a bouquet of lilies and a bottle of wine. "The place looks beautiful, Alice," she said as she stepped into the foyer, her eyes taking in the transformation. "So different. So... you." I smiled, accepting both gifts with a kiss on her cheek. "That's the idea. Come in. You're the first to arrive." She followed me to the kitchen, where I was putting the finishing touches on the appetizers. "Can I help with anything?" "You can open the wine if you'd like," I suggested, still getting used to this new dynamic between us, this emerging friendship that felt so foreign yet so right. As she worked the corkscrew, she glanced at me. "I met with the divorce lawyers again yesterday." "How did it go?" I asked, arranging prosciutto-wrapped figs on a platter. "Better than expected. Your father is surprisingly agreeable to my terms." She poured 2 glasses of wine and handed me one. "I think he's finally realized how much he has to lose if this gets messy in public." I nodded, not wanting to press for details she might not be ready to share. The last month had revealed so many secrets about my parents' marriage and my father's business dealings, each revelation more surprising than the last. "And you? How are you feeling about everything?" I asked instead. She took a sip of wine, considering. "Lighter," she finally said, "like I've set down something heavy I've been carrying for years." She looked around the kitchen, which I'd updated with new lighting and cabinet hardware. "Rather like what you've done with this house, actually. Taken something oppressive and made it breathe again." The doorbell rang again before I could respond, and soon the house was filled with the warm buzz of conversation and laughter. Jessica arrived with her girlfriend Sarah, followed quickly by Emily and Mark, and then my work friends. The energy was so different from the tense formal dinners of my childhood that it felt like an entirely different house. As we gathered around the table, Emily leaned over to whisper in my ear, "This is nice, Alice. Really nice." I smiled at my sister, our relationship slowly healing now that we were both emerging from our father's shadow. "Thanks for coming. I know it's a bit weird considering..." She shook her head. "Not weird. Necessary." She glanced around the beautifully set table. "It's like reclaiming the space." Dinner progressed with easy conversation flowing between work stories, gentle teasing, and genuine questions about each other's lives. No one dominated the discussion. No one belittled anyone else's achievements. No one went silent out of fear of saying the wrong thing. During dessert, a simple berry tart I'd picked up from my favorite bakery, Jessica raised her glass. "To Alice," she said, "who not only made a brilliant investment, but turned a house into a home." Everyone joined the toast, but it was my mother's eyes I sought across the table. She held my gaze, her smile both proud and a little sad. "To Alice," she echoed softly. Later, as the evening wound down and guests began to leave, my mother lingered, helping me load the dishwasher despite my protests. "I have something to tell you," she said as she carefully placed wine glasses on the top rack. "I've decided to use some of my settlement money to start a foundation for women leaving difficult marriages, financial assistance, legal advice, emotional support, all the things I wished I'd had access to years ago." I paused in wiping down the counter. "Mom, that's amazing." She smiled, a hint of nervousness in her expression. "I was hoping you might consider being on the board. With your business acumen and personal experience, you'd bring valuable perspective." The request took me by surprise. "I'd be honored," I said, meaning it. "Truly." She nodded, looking pleased but still slightly uncertain. "There's something else too. I've been thinking about moving, not just out of the area, but I've always wanted to live near the coast, California maybe." "California?" I repeated, trying to mask my surprise. My mother had never expressed any desire to move away from the East Coast before. "It's just an idea," she said quickly. "Nothing decided. But at my age, I don't want to waste any more time not living the life I want." I reached out and squeezed her hand. "Then you should do it. Live exactly the life you want." After she left, I wandered through the quiet house, still marveling at how different it felt now. My home, my space. A week earlier, I'd had my father's prized collection of hunting trophies removed from the den, replacing them with bookshelves and a comfortable reading chair. The space that had once been so aggressively masculine was now peaceful, inviting. I was arranging the last of the clean dishes when my phone rang. The caller ID showed James's number, surprising given his recent distance. "Hello?" "Alice." His voice sounded strained, tight. "Is Mom still there?" "No, she left about 20 minutes ago. Why?" He exhaled heavily. "Dad's been trying to reach her. She's not answering her phone." "Maybe she turned it off during dinner and forgot to turn it back on," I suggested, though I suspected my mother's silence was deliberate. "Maybe." He paused. "How was the dinner party?" "It was nice," I said carefully, not sure where this conversation was heading. "You were missed." He made a non-committal sound. "Dad's not doing well," he said after a moment. "The company, it's a mess. The board is talking about a complete restructuring, maybe even selling to a competitor." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied, and I was, not for my father necessarily, but for the employees whose livelihoods were at risk due to his mismanagement. "He asked about you," James continued, "about the house." I tensed slightly. "What about it?" "He wanted to know if you were planning to sell." James sounded uncomfortable. "I think he's hoping to buy it back if things turn around for him." I looked around my kitchen, the space I'd already begun to make my own. "I'm not selling, James. This is my home now." That's what I told him. Another heavy sigh. "Look, Alice, I owe you an apology. For a lot of things, but especially for never standing up for you when Dad would, you know." The admission caught me off guard. James and I had never been close, his position as our father's favorite creating a natural barrier between us. "Thank you for saying that," I said finally. I didn't realize until these past few weeks, being around him constantly, without Mom to buffer, how difficult he can be. A bitter laugh. "Rebecca is at her wit's end. She says if he makes one more comment about how she loads the dishwasher, she's moving to her sister's." Despite everything, I found myself smiling at the image. It's not easy being the focus of his criticism. "No," James agreed softly. "It's not. And you dealt with it your entire life." He cleared his throat. "Anyway, I was thinking maybe we could get coffee sometime. Catch up properly." "I'd like that," I said, surprised to realize I meant it. After we hung up, I poured myself a final glass of wine and walked through the house, turning off lights as I went. In my father's former study, now my home office, I paused to look at the framed photo I'd placed on the desk. It showed me at my college graduation, smiling despite the fact that my father had spent the entire day criticizing everything from my choice of major to my hairstyle. I picked up the frame, studying my younger self's forced smile, the tension visible in my posture even in that moment of achievement. Then I set it down and opened my laptop, pulling up the folder of renovation plans I'd been working on. The flooring had been just the first phase. Next would come new paint throughout, updated fixtures, perhaps even taking down a wall or two to create a more open floor plan. The house, my house, would continue to transform, just as I was. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "Dinner was amazing. So proud of you, sis." I smiled, typing back a quick thank you, then looked around the office once more. On the wall hung a single framed quote, a housewarming gift from Jessica. It read, "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to begin again." That's exactly what I was doing. Beginning again. Building a life on my own terms, in a space I had reclaimed not just physically, but emotionally. The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was nearly midnight. Who could be visiting at this hour? I made my way to the foyer, peering through the peephole with caution. My father stood on the doorstep, his posture rigid, his face set in grim determination. For a moment, I considered not answering. Then, drawing a deep breath, I opened the door. "Dad, it's late." He looked thinner than when I'd last seen him, the expensive suit hanging a bit loosely on his frame. His eyes moved past me to take in the transformed foyer with its gleaming new floor. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. "Come in, then." He entered cautiously, as if stepping into unfamiliar territory, which in many ways it was. The house he'd known had been systematically transformed, room by room, into something new, something mine. "You've changed everything," he observed, looking around at the lighter paint colors, the different artwork, the absence of the heavy, ornate furniture he'd preferred. "Not everything," I replied. "Just enough." He nodded, still standing awkwardly in the foyer. "James said you're not interested in selling." "That's right." "Even if I could match what you paid, or offer more?" I shook my head. "It's not about the money, Dad. It never was." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd seen countless times throughout my childhood. "This house, it means something to me." "It means something to me too," I said quietly. "It's where I learned that I wasn't enough, that nothing I did would ever meet your standards, that in your eyes, I wasn't even worth the floor I walked on." He flinched at the reminder of his own words. "I was angry that night. I didn't mean—" "You meant it," I interrupted gently. "You've meant it for years. Every criticism, every dismissal, every comparison to James or Emily. You meant all of it." He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "Things are different now. I'm different. Because you lost your company, your status, your money?" I gestured around us. "Because you lost this house?" "Because I lost everything," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "Everything that I thought defined me." I studied him, this man who had loomed so large in my life, whose approval I had sought for so long. He seemed smaller now, diminished not just by his financial losses, but by the shattering of his own self-image. "I'm sorry about the company," I said, and I meant it. "About the employees who are affected." He nodded, looking suddenly exhausted. "The board is voting tomorrow on the sale offer. It's a good deal, all things considered. Better than bankruptcy." An uncomfortable silence settled between us. "Why are you really here, Dad?" I finally asked. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly for what felt like the first time in years. "I wanted to see it, the house, one last time." Understanding washed over me. He'd come to say goodbye, not just to the house, but to the life it represented. The success, the status, the control. "Would you like a tour?" I offered, surprising myself with the suggestion. He hesitated, then nodded. "If you don't mind." I led him through the house, room by room, watching as he took in all the changes I'd made. Some he acknowledged with a small nod of approval, others with a slight tightening of his lips. But he remained silent, allowing me to guide him through this space that had once been his domain, but was now undeniably mine. In the kitchen, I offered him a glass of water, which he accepted with murmured thanks. "Your mother told me about her foundation idea," he said as he set the glass down. "It's a good concept. She'll be good at it." "Yes, she will," I agreed. "And her plans to move west, she mentioned that." He nodded, looking around the kitchen one last time. "Well, I should go. Thank you for letting me see the house." I walked him back to the front door, neither of us quite sure how to end this strange, subdued encounter. "Alice," he said as he stepped onto the porch, "the floors look nice." Such a simple statement, yet coming from him, it felt monumental. "Thank you," I replied. "And you look nice too. Happy." He cleared his throat. "It suits you." Before I could respond, he turned and walked to his car, a modest sedan that had replaced the luxury vehicle he'd once driven. I watched him drive away, a complicated mix of emotions swirling inside me. I closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. The encounter had lacked the drama I might have expected. No shouting, no recriminations, no grand apologies or emotional breakthroughs. Just a quiet acknowledgement of changed circumstances, of shifting power dynamics, of lives being rebuilt. As I made my way upstairs to my bedroom, the master suite that had once belonged to my parents, I thought about beginnings and endings, about foundations, both literal and metaphorical, about the floors beneath our feet and what they're truly worth. My father had been wrong about so many things, but perhaps most fundamentally about value, about what makes a person worthy, about what constitutes success, about what truly matters in the end. Standing at my bedroom window, looking out over the property that was now mine, I felt no triumph, no vindication, no desire to celebrate his downfall. Instead, I felt something quieter, but infinitely more powerful. Peace. The certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be, building a life on my own terms, creating a home that reflected not my father's values, but my own. I had bought his house, yes, but more importantly, I had reclaimed my sense of worth, not from the floor I walked on, but from the strength I had found within myself to stand tall upon it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new opportunities for growth. My mother's foundation, James's tentative olive branch, Emily's strengthening sisterhood, the continuing renovations that would further transform this house into my home. But tonight, in this moment of quiet reflection, I simply stood on my beautiful new floors and knew, with absolute certainty, that I was enough. Had always been enough. Would always be enough. And that knowledge, more than any house or possession, was the foundation upon which I would build the rest of my life.